fence. Where's Emily?
The future. First, man had to prove that a machine with rotors could actually fly. One curious machine in 1925 did just that. It was called an Autogyro. And its legacy lives on in the heart of the Norfolk countryside.
In 61 years of flying, I've flown all sorts of aeroplanes, from Gypsy Moths right up to the great B-36 10-engine bomber. And as far as I'm concerned, for the sheer pleasure of flying, the Autogyro beats the whole lot. There's a wonderful feeling of flight. It's almost being like a bird.
At the ripe age of 82, Wing Commander Ken Wallis still flies the Autogyro. He's been dedicated to them since he left the Air Force in the 60s.
Well, this is a bit like an aerial motorbike. It's so stable that you can take your feet off the rudder pedals and ride it side saddle. It flies itself.
The Autogyro is simply steered by stick and rudder. But what makes it unique is that, unlike a helicopter, its rotors are not driven by an engine. They're driven solely by the wind. The small engine at the back is to drive the propeller. This gives forward motion. The first one was designed by Spaniard Juan de la Cierva in 1925. It looked rather like a flying windmill. Although only experimental, it was the first aircraft with rotors able to fly, and Cierva was asked to demonstrate it in front of US Congress.
Until then, helicopters were just not practical. There were various hops into the air and crashes and so on. But many of the problems that the helicopter was facing were solved by the Autogyro.
Convinced they'd still be practical, Ken started to design Autogyros in 1961.
In here I've got all my Autogyros, all 19 of them. I keep them together.
Built almost 40 years later than Cierva's, Ken's are a little more advanced. He's designed and built so many as they've been used for everything from aerial photography to search and rescue. But one in particular became world famous.
Well, this one is Little Nellie, for the James Bond film, You Only Live Twice. A lot of people say it must have been fun making the film. The answer was it was really hard work. I did all the flying, 85 flights, 46 hours in the air, over the volcanoes in Japan, and we were 6,000 feet up. But of course, Sean Connery has been seen to sit in the seat wearing an open-neck sleeveless shirt outside his trousers. So although it was 6,000 feet, 6 o'clock in the morning, I was still having to fly in an open-neck sleeveless shirt. So it was quite cold. And I'm very fond of Little Nellie because she kept me going all the time. So she's definitely one of my rather special girls.
But not even the popularity of Little Nellie brought the kind of interest that there was in the helicopter. This, the first ever civilian helicopter, is the Bell 47. The development of a motorized rotor was what gave helicopters more power and, more importantly, more lift, allowing them to take off vertically. Because they're steered by the rotors, they're much more maneuverable.
It's like being Peter Pan. Wherever you want to go, that's where you go. You can even go backwards. It's wonderful.
Very forgiving machine on all movements, so very small movements, nothing sudden.
Brilliant. brilliant visibility. That's one of the things I like about this helicopter. It's almost all bubble.
You've got nothing between you and the ground except for the plastic. Nothing can beat it, really.
Is that just the greatest flying machine ever? I'm sounding like Hollywood. Stop it, stop it.
Larry Bell's achievement of the 47 was rather like a Hollywood story. It was World War II, and the Bell Company was busy producing fighter planes. But Larry Bell was more interested in designing a helicopter. To head the project, he appointed model designer Arthur Young and managed to draft in a few members of the aircraft team. Bell wanted his helicopter to give the sensation of flying on a cloud. A method of heating plexiglass to form a bubble canopy was eventually found. When the Bell 47 was launched in 1946, the little bubble became its trademark. Pilot Ed Sturmer.
Well, it is a fairly basic helicopter. There's certainly no cocktail cabinet in it, that's for sure. It's relatively slow, only does 70 knots, which means if there's a 30-knot wind, you are going quite slowly. Frequently flying along, you do notice that the taxis are going faster than you down the motorway. It's a piston engine. It's a very strong construction, being originally a military design. And they didn't waste any weight in the tail. They left it open, strong girder work, and just overall a very robust helicopter, something you can really feel safe in.
Most people think that if the engine fails on a helicopter, it just drops out of the sky, and it's not true at all. I'd much rather have an engine failure in a helicopter than a fixed-wing aircraft. I'll give you a feel for what it's like if you do have an engine failure. I'm not going to stop the engine, but I'll throttle it right back. Ready now? There we go. And we're gliding down now. So rotor still turning, engine just ticking over. We're going down, but when we get to the bottom, we can trade off all the energy in the rotor and make a soft landing. That's what an engine failure would be like, nothing more than that.
Safety was so important to Larry Bell because his Bell 47 was, in fact, the first ever commercial helicopter. It was to be modified and used for a number of different jobs. The US Postal Service bought the 47 for delivering mail. Oil companies transported crews to offshore oil rigs in it. The US Army trained their first helicopter pilots in it. And when war broke out in Korea in 1950, it became invaluable for evacuating wounded soldiers. It became known as the Korean Angel, a role which was later celebrated in the film and TV series MASH. It inspired pilot Tracy Martin to buy one.
I grew up watching the series MASH with my dad, and I thought, wouldn't it be great to paint the thing up and to use it on the air display circuit for other people to see? So I went off to the paint shop and I ordered a few litres of matte green olive drab paint. I spent the next few days with reels and reels of masking tape and a spray gun, putting it back into proper Korean War colours. These are the baskets that were used to carry the casualties during the Korean War. They fit right here on the side of the aircraft, and they're secured with a couple of clips. Obviously, time would have been of the essence to get your wounded soldiers away from the front line, and even though they look quite flimsy, being made of aluminium and wire, they're in actual fact quite tough. Also quite roomy, plenty of space to accommodate a 6-foot soldier. Legs down here, head up this end.
The Bell 47 was never built for war. It was too small, it was too vulnerable, and its 200 horsepower engine didn't give it the power needed for survival. But what it did in Korea highlighted the Army's need for a larger, more powerful helicopter, better equipped for the role of evacuation. In 1956, Larry Bell gave up the bubble and came up with a tougher, meaner machine, the UH-1, nicknamed the Huey. Ex-Vietnam pilot William Malo has been flying it for 26 years.
Every time I get in a Huey, I just strap it on, it becomes part of me. It's a very comfortable flying machine. It's kind of like your first bicycle. It's an old friend. Almost every Vietnam vet, they'll say it saved my life, or it brought food out, or it rescued my buddies, or it got me out of the jungle.
The Huey could not have had a tougher test than serving in Vietnam. It was the Army's first turbine-powered helicopter and had such high performance that just 60 seconds after takeoff, it could be a mile away. The large and robust Huey could carry everything from troops to artillery. More importantly, it could bring out 8 wounded soldiers in each lift.
If I counted every time I went out on a helicopter, not the hours I flew, it'd be at about 1,000 missions. We'd go back and forth all day long. I did get shot at several times, and you just try to hide behind the windshield knowing that the windshield's only made out of plastic. The Huey itself was a simple construction. It was designed to be maintained in the field. A lot of times we'd go out and we'd take bullet holes, and all we'd do is just take a piece of duct tape, tape it over the hole and fly it back in and then fix it in the rear.
With Hueys being continuously fixed and flown, over 35,000 soldiers were lifted to safety.
When the troops get on the helicopter, they load their equipment on. If the aircraft would hover, we would fly it. So the helicopter would always bring out more weight than the manufacturer said that it could take. My first tour in Vietnam, a typhoon hit South Vietnam, and it absolutely destroyed 300 or 400 villages. They were completely flooded out. They loaded a lot of women and children. We flew 50 miles to the refugee camp, and when I asked my crew chief to count the number of people who got off the helicopter, and there were 27 women and children that were on board on an aircraft that was designed to carry 8.
It was because of the Huey that the war in Vietnam, which spanned over 10 years, became known as the Helicopter War. It was when the helicopter came of age and was considered a crucial part of our lives.
Why should you drive the new Shogun? Well, for starters, the high tensile steel body gives a real feeling of security.
There's another 1183 somewhere in the area of Fairmont and Whiteman. I could have a unit check. So far, is there a unit to check the area of Fairmont, Whiteman, or Fairmont University for another 1183?
Our job is to keep an eye on the officer and make sure that if something does happen, they may not be in a position to call for help, but we are. The part of town that we're flying over is called Mid-City Division, and they are routinely the busiest area in the entire city of San Diego.
29 and supply room, 430 CL.
Okay, we're going to respond to a burglary alarm at a school. Okay, you never know when on a routine call like this. Now, if there was a bad guy with a gun hiding around the corner of that building going to gun down the officers, we would see it. It's just a really effective way of helping the officers on the ground. We didn't see anything on the roofs or anything unusual, so it's probably just another false alarm. Okay, we're going to head on, guys. We got to do some other stuff.
Having a helicopter is very important to the officers on the ground. It is able to see a lot of the things that we're not able to see, the tops of buildings, as well as tell us if cars are leaving or if suspects are hiding that we're not able to see from our position on the ground. Having the helicopter is, I'd say, like having at least 5 other patrol cars, quite an asset.
It's typical of American police departments to have their own helicopter units. In fact, California has the largest